Welcome to Software Gone Wild, the next generation. As you know, I was doing a podcast called Software Gone Wild ages ago when we were still young and stupid and believed in the powers of SDN. In the meantime, SDN became as meaningless as cloud and software still isn't ruling the world because AI will. But I was asked several times whether I will resume podcasting, and so I decided to go for the next generation. And we'll primarily talk about a particular software that went wild in the meantime. It's called NetLab. It's my ugly baby that I've been raising for the last 5 years or so. And the idea is that in most of the episodes, I will just find someone who uses NetLab in some interesting way and chat with them about what they're doing. So you might get, some ideas how you could use that tool to make your life easier. The first one who agreed to be the guest on the show and talk about this ugly baby of mine, and I think right now about 20 contributors or something. So the thing is getting some traction, is my good friend Ethan Banks, sometimes known, as the guy behind, what is that thing called? Packet herders, packet pushers, something. Yeah. Welcome, Ethan, and thanks for taking your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ivan, and thank you for NetLab. You're calling it an ugly baby. It's a beautiful baby. It's a handsome baby. It's a baby
it's so nice to hear that.
Happy. Well, for me, and you and I exchanged some emails about this, but it's the version of a lab server that I always wanted. I used GNS3 for years. I spent plenty of time with EVE-NG, spent some time with Cisco's CML. I think they call it something else now.
Viral.
I don't remember whatever.
It was viral, and then
right. It was viral, and now it's CML.
And someone immediately figured out that means camel.
I used them all, and for a lot of them, it's just so tedious to get your little virtual machines, virtual images spun up, and then draw lines between them, and then do the addressing, and then do the configuration with the clicky UI, and then NetLab came along, and it's like, wait, I can define the whole thing, including tedious things I want, like I need this OSPF domain stood up, and I could just define it all in YAML, and up it comes. And if I don't care about addressing, it's just handled. I don't have to worry about that. If I don't care about things like what specific interface is plugged into which one, I can just let it all happen, and then, click boom, NetLab up, there's my lab, and I can get to working on things and so on. It instinctively works the way my brain works. And in that sense, NetLab just made me very happy, and why I say it's not an ugly baby, it's a beautiful baby.
Oh, that's because we're both old and we believe in text-based interface.
I mean, I run it on an Ubuntu server, and I use VI to edit the YAML file, and I got as fancy as adding a linter because it's so easy to hose up something in the YAML file, and the linter keeps me honest there in VI. But aside from that, it really is that straightforward. And yes, we're old on whatever level, and that means we're comfortable.
I was never
with the
brave
CLI.
enough to use VI, so for me, it's Visual Studio Code.
Oh, sure, yeah,
and it has an SFTP plugin, so whenever I save the file, it's automatically pushed to my server.
Yeah, I could certainly do that too. I've got VS Code. It's just I've been using VI for so long; it's just as easy for me.
I never grasped it. I mean, I had to use it, but my relationship to VI is like the one I had with Edlin, if you remember that one.
I do remember Edlin, yeah. It goes back a long ways. No, VI, I got forced into it in that I worked for an ISP for a few years. Actually, less than a year, because it went belly up. I got there because they were going to take over the world and had funding. And then 9 months later, they didn't have any funding, and they weren't going to take over anything. And so I got booted. But during my stint there, I had to know VI, because a lot of the infrastructure hosting we did was on Solaris, and that was the way to edit DNS zone files and SMTP files and Apache Conf and so on. That was part of my job. I was a data services engineer, and I had to learn it, and so I did. And I wouldn't say I'm a VI expert, but I'm very comfortable moving things around and moving text and doing the searches and all the things I need to do. So it's an easy way for me to edit NetLab topology files is that way. It's okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, when you mentioned an ISP in those days, whether you were on SunOS or Solaris, but you answered the question.
It was Solaris, yeah. Yeah, it was Solaris.
In those days, I solved the problem of not using VI by having all the automation on the PC side and then just pushing the files over.
Oh, yeah? So what was your automation solution at that point?
Microsoft Access Database.
Okay.
export it into some CSV file or something, and then a Perl script.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Perl. Obviously, Perl would have showed up. Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. Parse it, get it out in the format you need, and off you go. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We even configured the users on the dial-up servers because Cisco didn't have TechX Plus in those days. So we used RCP to transfer the files to the servers and then configure from the file because SCP wasn't invented yet, or it wasn't implemented by Cisco at least.
You know, all this reminiscing, what we're doing is it's demonstrating how old we are again.
Exactly. So let's move back to NetLab. How are you using it? What are
Well,
you
my
doing
use
with
case
it?
for NetLab is twofold. One, I started a new podcast last fall called N is for Networking, which addresses networking fundamentals. So my co-host is Holly, and Holly Metlitsky. She's only got 2 years in the industry, and so we've been going through a format of she's got questions and hopefully I've got answers. But there's details you forget. Like I was a CCA at one point, right? But that was years back. And if you're not like in tip top study condition so that you can go take an exam, there's just a bunch of details about things that matter that you forget. And so one of my use cases for NetLab is just to remember how certain things go and to prove certain assumptions I have are not correct. For example, take two OSPF routers and set their network types differently, make one broadcast and the other one point to point. Will they form an adjacency, yes or no? And the answer is yes. I thought the answer would be no, but the answer is yes, and it's weird. The results are just weird. And so, using NetLab proved that out for me. And there's things that Holly and I will be talking on the show, and I'll be like, boy, she'll ask a question that's some more esoteric detail. It's like, I don't know 100%. It's like, I think it would go like this, and I'll give my reasoning. And then afterwards, I'll pop into NetLab and set it up and go, either I was right or like, oh, that did not work how I thought. It's kind of interesting. Other things like she and I are working through a couple of episodes on IPsec. We did the basics of IPsec. Now, I used to teach IPsec in some detail. I taught a Cisco firewall class and a VPN class 20 years ago. So, but I knew IPsec cold really, really well. Do I remember all those details now where I can sit like the next show the first show was like the overview of IPsec and the protocol and so on. But we don't get into any transactional detail like how a tunnel comes up and so on. I'm going to sit with NetLab before I write that script and configure a couple of routers to talk IPsec to each other and do some debugs and watch all the setups and the teardowns and all of that to refresh my memory on how it works, cross-reference with documentation and some standards RFC stuff, and then I can write my script. That's how I'll use it. Yet another use case I've got is I'm working on, well, let me back up a second. One of the things I found fascinating about N is for Networking is that there is this hunger out there for basic networking knowledge, for fundamentals conversations. This has happened on a variety of shows on the Packet Pushers Network where like the guy like Ed Horley and the guys that do the IPv6 Buzz podcast, they'll publish a show on something about IPv6 fundamentals and get this huge reaction from people like, oh, that was great. I really needed to know that. That was a big deal. And they're like, this is kind of like old material, but yet it's really important for people. And as for networking is getting the same kind of reaction where there's this thirst for fundamental kind of stuff. And I'm like, isn't this all over the internet? Isn't this everywhere? Different CCNA courses and stuff like that are out there. And it's there, but you got to dig around and it's not always friendly. Sometimes it's very, instructor tone kind of heavy. And I think some people maybe struggle with that format where, Holly and I chatting as a conversation, it's easier to deal with. Okay. So then my next use case is, man, for N is for Networking audio podcast. Well, we do video too. We publish it on YouTube, but we need to have like a lab companion that goes with some of the episodes. Hey, in episode 50, whatever, we talked about X. Well, here's a lab that gets into some of the things that we were talking about if you want to see some of this stuff in action. And that's where I'm going next. I'm starting to build labs with that in mind, where there will be Lab Day is the format I'm thinking of that demonstrates. I want to say 10 or 15 minutes, but nothing I produce seems to be 10 or 15 minutes even. I can't seem to.
I know how that works.
Yeah, but publish a lab that illustrates and underscores something that Holly and I were talking about in a previous podcast episode. because NetLab makes it easy. It just takes so many labs I used to do. It's like, I don't want to take the time to build this thing out. I just don't. And that the inertia of clicky dragging things around and, addressing and all of that stuff. I know Camel does some of that stuff, CML. I know there's some forms you can fill out that automate some of that stuff, but still.
Not any longer, I think.
But did they take that away?
Yeah.
It's been a while. Okay.
Yeah. So I was writing a blog post saying, well, Viral got almost there, and but you had to fill in the forms. You didn't have the YAML file. And then someone wrote, you know what? It's gone. And then a Cisco PM jumped into the discussion, if I remember correctly, saying, well, there was no demand for that, so we took it out. Seriously? Then I got some back-channel rumors saying, well, we can't do everything at the same time. We had to get rid of all the other things we did in the past and rewrite the whole thing to make it better. And then, you can't rewrite everything at the same time. You have to start somewhere, and then some parts are incompatible, and that gets.
Yeah, so maybe it gets added back then, is what I'm hearing there. But I haven't fired
up.
I
mean, that was
CML
one of the best things with CML.
Yeah.
That was the real difference between CML and something like GNS3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The only other difference is that you pay to have the legal images that you're not supposed to use anywhere else anyway. So whatever else you're doing is not legal anyway.
Right.
Now, off the record, because no one will be watching or listening to this.
Oh, good. I'm glad it's just us. Good.
Yeah, it's just us. What devices do you use in your labs?
I will give you the list of what I've got fired up so far. I'm going to log in right now and tell you, because my audience is looking at predominantly Cisco stuff. I have a bunch of Cisco images loaded, but I also have Arista, EOS and VEOS. Those are both there as options. CEOS this seems to be the lightest weight one. I've got Aruba CXOS loaded. I've got then a bunch of Cisco images. I got the CAT 8000V is there. The CSR 1000V is there. iOS V level L3, iOS V layer 2. I've got the behemoth, the XRV9K image, the big monster.
That's the one where you start a lab and then you go and make a 3-course meal.
Oh yeah,
and you earn a Michelin star and you get back and still not configured.
It takes forever to boot that thing, but then you got iOS XR, so it's something to be said for it. I've got the 9300V image there, and then I got Dell OS 10, Juniper VSRX, Juniper VPTX, which it's a little VPTX story. So I was having fun with my server, just wondering how many images can I load on this thing before it breaks. So it's a bare metal server running Ubuntu and then NetLab on top. So there's no there's no additional virtualization layer in between. It's a bare metal box. With the Cisco iOS L3 image, that's really light. That you can do a lot of stuff with that.
Half a gig or something.
Yeah, it's tiny. So I mean, I wrote a topology YAML file for 32 of those and had them all interconnected in a variety of ways, and then running OSPF. And I just want to see if I stand this up, is this stable? And it's a Xeon with 8 performance cores.
That was the next question. So you started all 30 of them at the same time, or did you do the staggered start?
I didn't do the staggered start. I wasn't even aware of the staggered start thing until this came up in the Packet Pusher Slack channel. I mentioned, haha, here I am having fun with, starting through images. And yeah, you watch all 8 cores just pegged to 100% while they all boot. But then it calmed down and it was fine. It was actually acceptable. And then someone pointed out to me, hey, there's a staggered start feature. And I got to go back and look at, I don't remember the details of how to do that, but right, there's that. Well, okay. Now I did not look to see how heavy the VPTX image was. Still don't know, because I still haven't looked it up yet. This just happened yesterday or the day before, how many cores and how much memory it needs. So I just replaced in my topology YAML file and said, I don't want to use the iOS image. I want to use the VPTX image, and said, go. And I sat there, I'm looking at HTOP and just watching the memory utilization climb. And I got 128 gig in it, and that killed it.
You bricked the box, 32. Right?
Yeah, it totally hung. I had to go downstairs and power cycle it to get it back.
Yeah, I did that same mistake once. Only I wasn't at home.
No. Yeah, but anyway, That's another image of kind of the VPTX, and I'll figure out what resources it requires. And I was thinking there's maybe a feature there for NetLab of if you could have it know your resources, like the number of cores and the amount of memory and what you're asking it to load, where it could be like, do a sanity check and go, you just asked me to load
I
something that
love
needs
this.
3 times the memory of what you got in this box. I don't think you want to do this. I'll do it I'll try it if you want me to, but I don't think it's going to work.
I love this. I'll add that.
It's an interesting one.
Because
As a possible
we
feature,
already
yeah.
know the memory requirements for the images because we specify that in the Vagrant file.
Okay.
So for every VM device, we know exactly how many cores and how much memory we give it. So it should be really easy to just add it up and somehow use LSCPU or something to find the number of cores and find the total memory and do some sanity checks. Love it. Thank you.
Well, I didn't honestly expect what I was doing to work. I was trying to break the box just to see what would happen, and I did break it by just grossly oversubscribing what was there. But anyway, so
Yeah.
Juniper VPTX, and then just 2 more I have loaded so far. I got MikroTik Router OS 7, and I got a Microsoft Sonic instance that's probably needs to be updated. It's
Did
about 8
you
months
ever
old
start
now.
that Sonic instance?
Haven't yet, no. I wanted to
It's
play with it
useless.
because I hear it's a weird beast to get your
It's
head around.
useless.
So, oh yeah, no good.
So it's totally weird, yeah, on the data plane side. So I figured out the bare minimum to have the interfaces configured, and somehow I got them up and running. And then on the control plane side, they're running some subsets, custom built FRR. So it only runs BGP, nothing else. And then, of course, you can't run iBGP because you don't have an IGP to go with it. So it's eBGP only. And that's what they need. So I'm perfectly fine with that, but it's boring.
Yeah. It feels like the use case for Sonic then might more be as an automation platform or something along those lines.
Well, if you're building a hyperscaler data center and you're only interested in eBGP and that's your whole life, then it's a perfect platform.
Now, there are more images I know that NetLab supports. I just haven't added any more to the mix. But there's additional ones I totally meant to get the Vagrant files built for it, so then add it to the pile. But that's all I've got at the moment, and that's a lot.
By the way, how hard do you find it to build the boxes, the Vagrant boxes? Because I'm worried that's one of the showstoppers for people starting with NetLab.
Once I did it once and worked through the documentation, kind of understood what was expected, it was straightforward enough. But I had to dig through the documentation to understand what needed doing so that I could get to that point. Once I did that, I just spent, I don't know, several hours collecting images and going to the manufacturer, downloading them, etc., and then getting them set up. But I was in that rhythm, so I kind of knew the commands and what I needed to do. I haven't looked at that specific thing in a few months, so I don't remember it being that hard once I got past the first one and understood the workflow.
Yeah, the one thing I never bothered to implement was the thing that VRNetLab is doing, where they're building containers around the VM images.
Okay.
And they actually connect to the console port and feed the machine. They pretend that they're typing so that, they're dealing with the console port stupidities and logging in and pasting initial configuration, the thing that I expect you to do, because it's just simpler to rely on humans than AI. It's not AI, it's expect
Not
scripts.
AI, but yeah, I know.
By the way, what I want to ask you is, you plan to publish those labs that you're using?
Yeah, I'm intending to publish the YAML files anyway as I get there. I don't know if it's just me or if I've got a Packet Pushers GitLab or GitHub account, but my intent was publish those in Packet Pushers GitHub and come up with some kind of a hierarchy so that things are easy to find, and just put the YAML files out there so people don't have to think too hard. Obviously, the prerequisite is you're using the right image. You've got an image that'll support this, but that's tweakable by whatever image people have on hand. The easiest one being Arista. I mean, that's the very easiest one. It's a industry standard CLI, shall we say, if that's that, with no barrier of entry for that. that, as I recall, I don't even think you have to log into a Arista
You
site. I
do.
don't remember. Do you?
No, you
Okay.
have to create an account, but you can create a guest account and then you can just load those 2 bits of software,
Yeah, they
the
don't fight you
container
at
and the
all.
VM. And it's now I think you can even download the older images because previously it was just the latest image. Now I remember seeing previous software versions.
Other stuff, I don't remember what hoops I had to jump through to get them. Either I already had them or they were straightforward enough to
Dell
get. I don't
is, I
recall.
think, free without registration. MicroTik is free. Juniper is all free.
Yeah.
For Aruba, you have to tell HP your shoe size and your grandmother's maiden name.
I remember that being a headache. Yeah, I had to do a bunch of, because I had an account that wasn't the right thing. Whatever. I got there in the end. I remember getting it, but yeah.
And that was like the most bizarre experience I had with networking vendors.
Yeah, but whatever. You get, plus I've just got collections of images from previous lives and labbing and so on. I have a big old folder just filled with different images, some of which are useful and some of which are not, and many of which are ancient because they're from some 2600 XM router I was using 20 years ago that has something that I was using in GNS3 or something like that.
You don't even have the CPU emulation for that anymore.
No, right? No, not anymore. That stuff's all gone. Yeah. But I still got the bits. Still got the ones and zeros sitting around in an archive folder as people do. So yeah, I try to be careful and respectful of all the vendor licensing and all that stuff too.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they have to pay the bills as well.
Yeah, they surely do. They surely do.
Well, but I totally agree with you. I try to push Arista wherever possible. I mean, they make things available almost hassle-free.
Yep.
Every time I bump into someone from Arista, I go like, wouldn't it be nice if we could just download the container from Docker Hub?
Still got to log in. Fair enough. All right.
No, I am perfectly okay with having to log in with my account. They have to control that.
Yeah.
And you have to click the button, I agree to the licensing terms. I'm totally fine with that. But I would like to have a CLI version so that if I'm starting the whole thing in GitHub code spaces, I don't want to copy paste the container file through the browser, which is what you have to do today.
So, okay, NetLab, you started as a fun project and you've been going at it for 5 years. So you're committed to this thing. You've seen a lot of people begin to contribute. Where does NetLab go next? Do you have future plans for it?
No. I mean, you mean like going commercial or something?
I don't know.
No.
Just you're going to keep it as a community project.
I'm semi-retired. I live off karma points. I need them.
So it's keep working on the project as is, adding new modules. Like I was popping through the documentation. Like there's an experimental SRv6 module, for example. But just continue to work on features as they evolve.
I removed the experimental label from it because now it's supported on 2 platforms.
Ooh, yeah.
SRv6, such an ugly baby.
I haven't spent any time with it to have an opinion.
Yeah. So someone contributed the initial module that was really easy, and it was only for Nokia SROS, and it didn't have any functionality apart from setting up the segment identifiers. Mm-hmm. And then he implemented the whole thing on Arista, I think, and SROS, if I remember correctly. And now he can do VPN transport over SRv6. So you can do VPN v4 and VPN v6 over SRv6. And I was like, oh, gee, I have a Cisco IOL image, the IOS XE. The lightweight stuff, and it also claims to support SRv6, so let's try that. It doesn't interoperate with Arista.
Interoperability has become such a challenge these days.
Yeah, and FRR has some SRv6, so I think we have that one as well now, but didn't implement any services or something, so there's something weird going on there.
You said FRR, and you've mentioned it before, and I'm very familiar with FRR. I've used it a bit. That's one of the images I can boot into with if I set it up, right?
Yeah, because
in NetLab?
They publish everything on GitHub Container Registry, I think. So you can download the image when you start the lab.
Yeah, I don't even have to do anything other than specify it in
you just say
topology YAML in that case.
So it's FRR and Nokia SR Linux and VIOS and Linux stuff. You just specify the devices And because the container images are public, Container Lab just goes what? NetLab tells Container Lab what image to use. Container Lab starts and tells Docker what image to pull down, and then Docker pulls down the image.
Yeah. Okay. And you just listed off all, like I got, if you noticed when I was giving you my list of all the images that I've got configured in this lab, I was going alphabetical, and I got as far as Microsoft and Sonic and and everything you just listed were all the other ones I'm interested in. Vios is interesting. Nokia, definitely interesting. And
Yeah,
and so on.
definitely take a look at Nokia
Yeah.
because it's totally different.
And they're different in good ways from my exposure
Yeah,
to
I
them
like
so
it.
far. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the first thing, they have the candidate configuration like Junos. So you modify stuff and then you do commit. SR Linux is particularly different because you don't have the global routing table. You have network instances and everything is a network instance. So you log into the box and you can't do anything. Like you can't even see the routing table. You can't see the interfaces. You're like, what the heck? And then you figure out that you have to select the default network instance, and then the world opens.
Aha. Okay.
SROS is not like that there, but there you have to select router base.
So similar kind of a concept then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they started from the total service provider world. So you have it's really weird because you have the router base where you would configure, the core facing stuff. And then you have the customer stuff that you configure in different layer 3 VRFs. So far, so good. But what about layer 2? Turns out that you have to configure the interface in some weird object that's somewhere between the router base and the layer 3 VRFs. So there's something in between there, and the interfaces are configured in that object, and then you use those interfaces in router base.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, makes perfect sense, right?
It's probably like anything else. You get used to it.
Yeah.
And, then it's fine. Yeah.
But the learning curve is, let's say, bumpy.
So I got a NetLab question for you that we were talking about over email. It's probably good to bring it up here as well. Is there a way I can bring up 2 labs at once within NetLab? Yes. Okay. Because by default you can't.
Well, by default you can, but
well, if you just do NetLab up, it's there. Change to a different directory with a different default.
you
say
can't,
NetLab up, you can't in that case. So what's the secret?
The secret is the Multilab plugin.
Multilab plugin. Okay.
Yeah. So you see, the problem is that if you bring up 2 NetLab instances, the management network name overlaps, and the IP addresses in the management network overlap.
The 192.168, I think that's the network that is used by default. For that management.
So we have to create a different management network and a different subnet for the management network for every lab.
And for people that don't use NetLab, the management network is what we're actually interfacing with when I say NetLab connect device name.
Yeah.
You're actually hitting the...
NetLab works strictly, in Docker world, you can connect to the Docker container, but with the VMs, it works strictly through SSH.
Yeah, okay.
There is no console connection. If you know how, you can always connect to the console with libvirt, virtual shell, virsh command. You have to know the VM name, and then you can connect to the console, and that's nice to know if you're doing troubleshooting, like why is this box so slow to boot? You start the lab, and then you look at the VM names, and then you connect to the console so you can see, the boot sequence, and then you understand why iOS XR takes 3 days to boot.
I don't know that I have too many use cases for the Multilab scenario, but it's a Multilab plugin. Now the Multilab plugin is a NetLab thing.
The Multilab plugin is really simple. We defined where it needs to patch the values. So it's the management network name and the subnet and a few other things. And then you specify the lab instance ID. It's a number from 1 to whatever. And then it takes all those parameters and patches that number into those parameters. And then you can have multiple labs running at the same time because they would have different names and subnets. And you can specify that instance ID is somewhere in the system defaults. And so you could have different defaults for every user. So you could have multiple users on the same server running different labs, or you could have the instance ID specified in the directory, because you can have the default file in the directory, so every directory would have a different instance ID, or you can specify it in the environment variable.
As I've been working with NetLab, it's occurred to me that what it seems to be, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it's a Python wrapper that is just hiding a bunch of configuration stuff for you. It's using NetLab is like an administration tool that takes a whole bunch of other tools and just makes them work together seamlessly. So you don't have to think. Like you've got ContainerLab is under there, and libvirt is under there, and
Vagrant
Ansible
and
Vagrant.
Yeah.
And all NetLab really is Python scripts that are kind of the orchestrator to make all of this stuff do what it does?
Well, yes. In a nutshell, yes. It's the umbrella orchestration system of all those things. Plus all the other things like the transformation of lab topology into device data and IP addressing and routing protocol design and device templates and all that.
That is another question I had for you about this, because you're supporting a bunch of different operating systems, and to express something as straightforward as an OSPF instance, what the configuration actually looks like is going to vary widely from device to device. So,
yes.
How are you modeling this? Or are you relying on Ansible if it happens to have a module to? Okay.
No. Ansible
so how are you modeling all this then?
So effectively, you get a topology file that says, I have OSPF in area 1 on this device, and I have area 0 on this interface. So what NetLab does when it takes your lab topology and creates device data is it figures out what parameters have to be set per node, like the OSPF process ID and the per node OSPF, so the default OSPF area for the node. And then it figures out what needs to be set on every interface. So if you didn't specify OSPF area on the interface, it would take the node OSPF area. If you didn't specify the node OSPF area, it would take the default OSPF area. And then it would apply that to every interface. And then it would go like, okay, do I have BGP running on this interface? Because if I have eBGP running on this interface, I don't want to run OSPF on the same interface. So
there's a lot of logic and dependencies going through that. You're thinking like a network engineer would think. So how is that a bunch of conditional statements within Python to achieve that?
Well, for every networking protocol, we have a separate module, which is a Python file, which can be really easy in some cases, or it can be like 2,000 lines for VLANs. And then that thing figures out, as you said, what would a sane network engineer do in this case?
Right.
And sometimes I get in fights with the young Turks who are overzealous and want to do crazy stuff. And I define what would a network engineer do, like what would I do. But as the whole thing is really fully extensible, you can always write a plugin, and then you load the plugin, and the plugin is called at every step of the transformation process. So there are like 15 hooks that get called. And you can influence, so you can step on as many toes as you wish in the plugin and amputate some legs and remove some toes or add the sixth toe to this leg.
Now, I was saying model, and I'm thinking data model like a Yang model or an OpenConfig model, something like that. Do you use or need a model like that for any of this stuff? Okay.
Well, those things have too many parameters. We don't want to go that deep. Mm-hmm. So on an OSPF interface, we probably have less than 10 parameters. So it's OSPF area, it's OSPF network type, whether the interface is passive, the OSPF cost, and then we added the timers, plus BFD if you want to use BFD. So less than 10 parameters per interface. If you look at the OSPF Yang, so IETF or OpenConfig OSPF Yang data model, I'm sure they have more stuff. If you look at the vendor data models, they have like, the usual 50 parameters per interface.
So then you've got that base set of parameters, like in OSPF, you've got roughly 10.
Yeah.
How do you translate that into code? or
Well,
configuration stanzas?
we have configuration templates for every device, for every technology we support. So
Okay.
hundreds and hundreds of files where someone had to look at those parameters and generate the corresponding configuration commands in the lovely Jinja 2 template, the easiest to use
Okay.
thing on this world.
And therefore, for every time you want to add a new feature to NetLab, like you've got, I don't know, a stack of them that are supported now, BGP and OSPF, a variety of routing protocols and VLANs and and other things. When you want to add a new feature, that means you're in for building a whole bunch of new Jinja templates. First of all,
Yes.
defining the parameter list that you're going to work with,
Yeah.
and then mapping all those into a whole bunch of new templates so that no matter what 2 devices or 3 devices, whatever, I'm building in the lab, you can express the configuration for that and
Yeah.
get it all stood up when I say NetLab up.
Yeah, so typically what happens is someone comes with an idea for a new feature and then has to write the Python stuff first that takes, NetLab parameters and transforms that into interface parameters or what have you. Sometimes it's as easy as just adding attributes, like adding the OSPF timers was really just defining attributes where you can specify the timer because there's nothing to do with that. It's just values. Sometimes it's more complex. And then hopefully the person who got the idea would implement this on more than one device so that first we see that the device data model makes sense, that it is useful on more than one device. It's not very device specific. Sometimes, you go and you try to do something and you're too focused on. Once I was too focused on Cisco iOS, or no, it was FR routing, and I was doing OSPF areas, and I was like, oh yeah, I want to have all these nice features. And then it turns out that half the vendors didn't implement half of the stuff from the NSSA RFC. Because in theory, you could summarize the external routes that are redistributed into NSSA area before you redistribute them into the backbone. Junos has that, FR routing has that, and that's about it.
And that doesn't mean you can't configure those things on an image that supports it. It just means I can't configure that via topology .yaml and stand that up and have NetLab configure that for me.
In that particular case, I was so far gone that I was like, okay, I'll implement that. And then for everything where we know that half devices support it and half of them don't, we have the feature flags in device definition, and then NetLab would go like, oh, you can't do that on this device. It's either the device doesn't support it or we don't support it. It doesn't matter. You can't do it. And sometimes like all the devices can do something but one. And in that case, we have device quirks, where after everything is done, you would have a device-specific code that gets called, and that code goes like, okay, are you trying to do something doesn't work on this device? And then that device-specific code would generate an error message like saying, oh, gee, you can't have 2 OSPF processes on this box. Talk to your vendor. But yeah, it's... But you know what? That's the beauty of having a team of core contributors, and everyone cares about different platforms. So when someone adds a new feature, pretty quickly 2 or 3 other people submit pull requests to have that feature implemented on their beloved boxes. So a feature appears, and most probably in the same release, if it makes sense, you'll have it supported on anywhere between 5 and 10 boxes.
Yeah, it's I keep up with I follow your blog and keep up with the releases and the new stuff that's coming out, and it's pretty steady that you and I didn't know there were 20 people that were contributing now. I thought it was you and a couple of others. It sounds like
yeah, there are like 4 of us right now that do the 95% of the stuff.
Yeah.
But there are still people that, someone, for example, just submitted a pull request that on Arista, you can't configure IPv6 BFD for ISIS on an interface. And so I decided I just won't do it. And he submitted a PR saying, well, I would like it to be on by default if you're using BFD for IPv6 with ISIS. So I would suggest that we add this one command and change the default behavior and document the caveat and all that. He's a contributor now.
There you go.
Yeah, and I'm happy. I mean, honestly, the guy fixed a real problem he had. And sometimes I have to say no because, the thing is not worth fixing, or they fix it the wrong way or whatever. But this one was picture perfect.
Oh, you just implied something else, which is all the code. It's on GitHub, if I remember right.
It's all on GitHub.
And you can look at all the scripts and everything. And if I wanted to, I could sit there and try to. I haven't done that, but I could sit and look at all the Python and start getting my head around it if I wanted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't have the time, Ivan. I don't know when I do it.
Hey, you're using the tool. I like that.
It is a great tool.
Yeah, I just published the labs.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think, aside from topology.yaml, what else would you say I should publish for the labs?
Well, I always include some lab topology.
Like a diagram of some sort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we support 2 graphing tools, and they are not too bad once you get to know them.
Yeah, I've generated some of those, and I'm frustrated by their limitations because I want to, I need to maybe invest in some other tools. But I generated a graph.dot of this 32 router thing I built, just not because I needed that, but just for fun, and had some meshing that was going on in there, and it displayed them. It gave me a diagram that I could look at in a visualization tool, but I couldn't edit them and drag them around because I probably need to buy something that would allow me to edit, and I haven't invested in anything yet.
You would have to specify the coordinates in the configuration, in the dot file or something.
Yeah, and I was looking at it, and I didn't understand the coordinate system off the top of my head. It wasn't immediately obvious how to deal with it.
But I figured a few tricks with the auto placement, and one of them is coming out in the next release.
Oh, okay.
So the
Space
first
things
thing
out a little more
is the order of nodes matters.
How
because
so?
It puts the first node on the top or on the right, on the left if you go left to right.
Yeah.
So it starts with the first node and then it builds down from there.
Mm-hmm.
So in leaf and spine fabric, you should have spines defined first and then leaves.
And that natural layout should be make more sense for what we're expecting to see.
And then the graphs look better.
Mm-hmm.
And the other problem I had was when there would be a switch and the host connected to a subnet. The way the graph file was generated, it was a switch to subnet link and a host to subnet link.
Yeah.
And then the switch and the host would be on the same level. And the subnet would be below them.
Yes, I have seen this visualization. Yeah.
Yeah, and now you can specify link order on the individual interfaces. And so if you say the link order of the host is really high, then the links will go switch to subnet and then subnet to host. And that pushes the host below the subnet, and then it looks nice.
Well, I definitely have more work to do in NetLab to get more proficient. As I've dug through the documentation, I'm finding, and I understand the verbiage and what all the words mean and how the documentation is organized, which took me a little bit to get my head around, but now I kind of know where to go and what to look for. It's gotten easier and easier for me to use and solve little problems, or not even problems, just like, I want this instead. How do I make that happen? And then I can sort that out.
As I told you before we started recording, do open a discussion.
Open a discussion on what forum?
On
in
GitHub.
GitHub, I mean? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. GitHub has great collaboration tools on every repo. So you can open a discussion where you can just ask a question or discuss a new idea or discuss a proposed feature or whatever you wish. If you are leaning more toward, I think this is wrong, then you just open a bug report, which they call issue. And the beauty of all that is that it's all public and searchable.
Yeah. As opposed to Slack, where things go to die after a certain amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, for me, I've been swimming in this sea for quite a while, so the waters are familiar. I don't even know what people are struggling with. So, if you open a discussion saying, I'm trying to do this and I can't figure this out, then that's a strong signal to me I have to fix the documentation. or I
Gotcha.
have to write another tutorial or a blog post or whatever explaining how to do this particular thing. Or it could
Yeah.
be that you are onto something and we are not doing a good job in that particular area. So, for example, someone came along saying, you know what, I would like to have, and I think he's on Windows laptop with Windows subsystem for Linux. So he's running Ubuntu VM on his Windows machine and running NetLab containers, what have you, in that Ubuntu. And he was like, you know what, I would like to have some command that I could execute for every node so that new windows would pop up and I would have like 5 windows open with 5 SSH sessions in them. And I mean, that sounds perfectly reasonable. But the problem is that it's hard to do it generically because he can open Windows in his Windows desktop. I'm over an SSH session. I could do the most tmux and I couldn't open the Windows.
Yeah, you're a layer away from his native operating system. Yeah.
Exactly. Whereas he's tightly integrated with his Ubuntu VM. So I was like, dude, what if I would just create a report that gives you the node names and then you can wrap that into a bash script that does whatever you wish? And he's like, yes, that's exactly what I need. So he
I've got a terminal
I mean,
emulator I use. It's one I've been using for a long time, well over a decade now, called Zoc by a company called MTech out of Germany, I think. They still maintain this thing, but it's got Rex scripting built in. So there's a lot of automation I can do with that. It's more or less expect the way it goes. You get a prompt and then you punch in a command. So if I wanted to build a command that changes into a specific NetLab topology directory and then connects to R1, I can build that as a as a script right in my terminal emulator. Click a button and it'll all launch, and I'll be at the network device command prompt. It's another way to go about it.
All operational NetLab commands, so the ones you use when the lab is running, accept the instance name. The default instance name is default.
Yeah, okay.
And then they switch into the right directory and execute the command there. So you could do netlab connect -i, for instance, default and the node name, and it would connect to the node regardless of where you are in the directory tree.
That's a good trick. You just saved me a little bit of, because I was getting ready to build out some of these scripts. That's funny.
Yeah, well, next time
I just
open the
automated
discussion, I will tell you it's there.
I'm the guy that's got to beat my head against the keyboard until I figure it out, though. So yeah, I'll have to get better about
don't
discussions. Yeah. Well, Yvonne, this is your show, but
yeah,
I've already said it.
It's time
Thanks for
to wrap
NetLab.
up. We are at about 1 hour mark. People are getting bored. So, anything else you want to add to ask?
Just wanted to thank you for NetLab, and I appreciate the community that's built around it and the usefulness of the platform. It's great. It's a great way to bring on board so many other technologies and then take the administrative headache out of it. It really has made it so much easier for me to go from an idea to there's a lab happening in front of me. I can do it now that I'm increasingly competent building the topology YAMLs. It's just easy, and taking that friction away is such a big deal. It really is. Thanks. Appreciate it. You and all the others that are putting the time into it.
Thank you for your time, for all the great feedback, for the use case that I think a lot of people will find interesting, particularly when you start publishing those labs. Oh, by the way, there is one thing that you can do to build multi-vendor labs. Every custom config template can be specified for multiple devices for different platforms. So you could say, I want to build an IPsec tunnel. And then you have a template for FRR and EOS and iOS and our beloved one, iOS XR. You can go, as fancy as you wish for as many platforms as you wish.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind. If I'm going to be... Yeah, I got to think about how I want to do that, because interoperability and multi-vendor is very interesting to me. But I think a lot of folks, especially new folks, they're trying to work on a specific certification. And so they tend to want to live in, that one ecosystem. So I've thought a lot about that. I'm not sure quite how to handle that, but yeah.
The usual problem.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
So anyway, thanks again. It's always a pleasure chatting with you.
And the same. Thanks for having me on. And welcome back. Welcome back. I don't know if you're going to keep calling it Software Gone Wild, but Software Gone Wild Next Generation. Yeah.
It's
All
Software
right.
Gone
Welcome
Wild,
back.
the next generation. And in case anyone got interested in this tool we've been discussing, all the documentation is at netlab.tools. So go and start exploring. And the GitHub repository is still at github.com/ipspace/netlab, because all the reasonable organization names like NetLab or Network Lab or anything like that were already taken. So if someone figures out a great organization name that's still available on GitHub and that we can grab and move that thing away from my personal account, please let me know. I will definitely do that.